When the relationship with your child is fractured, the pain is, well, it can be completely overwhelming and so isolating. If you're a parent who's trying to find a way back to your teen or your adult child, you already know this is one of the hardest things anyone can go through. Today, we're going to unpack the dynamics of what's really happening. And most importantly, we're going to give you a real practical toolkit to help you start rebuilding that bridge.
First, let's just acknowledge the emotional reality of this. This quote really gets to the heart of it. This isn't just some phase. The damage can echo for decades. What this tells us is that your struggle is real. The anger, the guilt you might be feeling, it's all valid. And it shows us just how incredibly important it is to learn how to break this cycle. Not just for you, but for the long-term health of your child too.
All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to define what's actually happening and look at the psychology behind it all. Then, and this is the big part, we'll get into your reconnection toolkit. These are the real-world strategies you can start using right away. We'll also touch on a few special situations like neurodiversity, and we'll wrap up with some very real, research-backed reasons for hope.
Okay, let's dive right in with Section 1, Understanding Parental Alienation. Before we can even talk about fixing something, we have to know exactly what we're dealing with. Getting this foundation right is absolutely the most critical first step. The key word on this slide, the one I really want you to hear, is manipulated. This is not about your child simply deciding they don't want a relationship because of something you did. It's a toxic dynamic where their natural love for you has been systematically poisoned. This is not a reflection of your parenting or your love. It is a symptom of a very broken family system.
Now, this table is so important because it helps us draw a line in the sand between true parental alienation and what experts call realistic estrangement. Just look at the differences. With alienation, there was almost always a good, loving bond before, and the child's reasons for rejection now, they often sound, well, absurd. Compare that to estrangement, which is usually rooted in a real history of poor parenting. And look at that psychological defense. Alienation creates this black and white thinking where one parent is a saint and the other is a demon. Knowing which side of this line you're on is everything.
So now that we have a better idea of what alienation is, let's move on to the why. Why is this happening? Understanding the psychology behind your child's behavior is really the key to unlocking empathy, not just for them, but for yourself too. This isn't about them rejecting you. It's about a psychological defense they've been forced into.
This idea of splitting, which comes from the work of Karen Woodall, is a complete game changer. Imagine your child is trapped in this impossible loyalty war. It's unbearable. So, to survive, their psyche literally splits in two. One parent becomes all good and you tragically become all bad. That cold, maybe even robotic person you see, that's not your kid. That's a protective shell. So when they say, this is my decision, it's what's called an illusion of choice, a script they've adopted to stop the internal pain. And this right here is typically the source of that unbearable pressure. The alienating parent is often driven by their own deep-seated issues, and they're using the child to get their own emotional needs met. And they can be incredibly good at it. They often present to the world with what are called the 4 C's. They're cool, calm, charming, and convincing. And that's exactly why so many professionals, friends, and family members get completely fooled. Okay, deep breath. We've laid the groundwork. Now we get to the heart of it all. This section is about what you can do. We're going to talk about real, practical tools and new mindsets that you can use to navigate these impossible conversations and start creating small openings for reconnection. This is your how-to guide. But before we jump into the tools, we have to get our expectations right. This is a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to take a ton of patience, a ton of consistency, and a real shift in focus from getting an immediate result to just staying true to your loving intention. These strategies are all designed for the long haul. Let's start with a really powerful tool for any email or text you send. It's called the BIF method. It stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. Keep your messages super short, just a few sentences. Stick to the facts: who, what, when, where. No opinions, no emotions. Keep the tone polite but neutral, and then end it. Don't leave the door open for an argument. The whole point here is to give them zero emotional ammunition to use against you. It completely disarms the conflict. Okay, now for one of the hardest moments, when your child hits you with a completely false accusation. Your gut reaction is to defend yourself, right? To argue the facts. But that almost always makes things worse. So try this instead. First, thank you for sharing that with me. Then, compassion. That sounds like it was really hard for you.
Then empathy for the feeling, not the fact. I can see why you would feel that way. Then, and only then, you can gently offer a single, simple, factual correction and immediately go right back to empathy. You're validating their emotion without validating the lie. It's a game changer. The PACE model is less of a specific technique and more of a whole mindset for every interaction you have. P is for playfulness, keeping things light, no heavy emotional pressure. A is for acceptance of their feelings, whatever they are, no buts. C is for curiosity, gently wondering about their world instead of judging it. And E is for empathy, letting them know you get it, that you feel their pain. When you bring this attitude, you create the safety they need to even think about letting your guard down. So, what is your main job in all of this? Karen Woodall puts it perfectly. She calls it holding up a healthy mirror. Your child's view of themselves and of you has been completely shattered and distorted. Your task is to manage your own grief, your own anger, so that what you reflect back to them consistently is a calm, stable, whole, and loving parent. You become the one true reflection in a house of mirrors. Of course, every child, every family is different. These core ideas apply to everyone, but sometimes you need to tweak your approach a little bit, especially if your child is neurodivergent or if you're trying to reconnect with an adult child who might even have kids of their own. If your child has autism or ADHD, the black and white thinking of alienation can be especially sticky. Reconnecting means you have to honor their unique wiring. That means front-loading, talking about any plans or changes way in advance. It means creating spaces that aren't overwhelming to their senses, using written plans so communication is clear, and so importantly, validating how they regulate themselves. Real connection happens when they feel you see and accept them exactly as they are. For adult children, Dr. Joshua Coleman has this, well, it's a pretty radical idea, but it can work wonders. He suggests writing a letter of amends. Now, this is not about apologizing for lies or things you didn't do. It's about searching for the tiny kernel of truth in their complaints. Maybe you were distracted during the divorce. Maybe you were working too much. By owning your small part with zero excuses, you can sometimes crack the door open for a real conversation. It's an act of profound humility that can break years of stalemate. All right, for our last section, I want to leave you with a very clear, very strong message of hope. Because this situation, as impossible as it feels, is not always permanent. The walls your child has put up, they can come down. And research actually shows us there are common life events that can trigger that change. Dr. Amy Baker's work found all these different catalysts that can make an adult child suddenly start to question the story they were told. Sometimes it's just growing up and getting more life experience. Sometimes the alienating parent finally turns on them. A huge one? Becoming a parent themselves and realizing they could never ever do that to their own kid. Your job isn't to force these catalysts. It's to hold up that healthy mirror, stay steady, and just be there for when the light finally starts to get in. Because in the end, you can't control what the other parent does. You can't control your child's distorted perceptions, but you have 100% control over you. This whole journey is about shifting from being a hurt, reactive parent to becoming a calm, therapeutic anchor for your child. So I'll leave you with this question. If your child's world is a confusing hall of distorted mirrors, how can you become the one single reflection that is always steady, always consistent, and always true? Because that, right there, is where all of your power lies.